Happy New Year on the Gregorian calendar, if that's something that feels exciting to you. It always, I feel like there's this moment of pause and reflection that I feel during this time of year. And it felt like an appropriate time to be in the underworld of healing. And in a little bit of vortex of time, as I feel like happens during the last week of the year, especially. So welcome back. And I think I'm just going to hand it right off to Pam. Pam has graciously offered to begin, help us settle in with a mindfulness practice today.
Hey everyone, can you hear me? Yes, okay. I'm going to keep it really simple today. But let's just start by, if you want to, you can close your eyes, or you don't have to, but at least let's soften our gazes and start with 3 deep breaths at your own pace. And we're just going to call all of our energy to us. So as we go out through the day, by the time we arrive here, maybe we've been rushing around, our minds and attention and energy could be scattered across many different places, many different times or timelines. Maybe some of your attention is in something in the past. Maybe some of your intention is in not even a real timeline, still having that argument that never actually even happened. Let's get all of those pieces of ourselves into our physical bodies in this moment. And that's just as simple as setting the intention. I call all my energy back to me. You can kind of feel those scattered bits of yourself returning home. And then we'll say, I release anything that isn't mine. All those pieces of energy that are other people's or don't belong with you can go back right where they belong. So hopefully now we're whole people, centered and grounded in our bodies in this moment. And we can just notice that. Notice what it feels like. Bring our attentions into our bodies and become aware of where your feet are right now. Notice the feeling of them on the floor or wherever they are in the room that you're in this very moment. And then become aware of your ankles and your calves. And just notice that they're there. Moving up your legs. Notice your body. You might find as you bring your attention to different parts of your body that you're sitting in like an uncomfortable position or clenching a muscle, and you can just relax with the attention. Move up through your hips and your belly, and your back. You might notice discomfort or pain depending on what's going on with your body, and we're just going to notice it. Become aware of your chest, your arms, your shoulders, your neck, your face. Maybe relax some of your facial muscles. and the top of your head. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. Hopefully, we're all here ready to start together.
Thank you, Pam. That was a beautiful reminder of just how deep I can go in a short period of time. I was really like internal in a deep place, and how meaningful it can be to just take a couple minutes. It doesn't even have to be, a big production. Just a few moments to center and recalibrate. Thank you for offering that for us today. So, Jamie Mosse is a longtime birthing from within mentor, a trainer. She's also a spinning babies instructor. She is a skilled body worker and has developed a course that we host called Touch from Within, which is a really beautiful blend of her learning as a body worker and blended with some of her own concepts and modalities and some of Birthing from Within's concepts and modalities. She's a lovely illustrator. She recently, last year, illustrated a book called The Breech Release with another mentor and spinning babies instructor, Birthing from Within mentor and spinning babies instructor, Nicole Morales, who's also a midwife. And she lives in the San Diego area. She just led our very first in-person back to in-person Crossing the Threshold. And I'm so excited that she's here with us today. She is very gifted and a special person in our collection of special people. And Jamie is going to spend some time with us exploring the hunter and the huntress archetype and offering what some of you may have only heard of, which is the original Tigers process, as was offered originally in Birthing from Within with Pam England, and then since adopted now into the Courageous and Compassionate Excavation of Fears. And just for any curiosity, the reason that it was adopted is because it was a lot easier for people to get in the time that we had to spend with them, because Tigers is a little bit more of a deep dive in certain areas in order to lead it, to learn how to master that piece. So we're real lucky that we've got this opportunity to experience it here today. I'm going to hand off to you, Jamie.
Thank you, Christine. Your introduction was so touching. I got a little teary-eyed. It's really sweet. And yeah, just a lovely reminder of this tapestry we're all weaving together of our gifts and our insights and our experiences. I recognize a few of your faces from Birthing from Within past, and some of you, the names are somewhat familiar. I'm really excited to get to know you all today a little bit. I'm a little nervous, but Pam's wonderful mindfulness practice reminded me just to notice what's there. That was like the quote from your practice that's really landing for me. So thank you for that. Yeah, I guess if anyone has questions as we go, either about me or the work in Birthing from Within, or the archetypes, or even the process itself once we're out of it, I really, really welcome that. I hope that this is somewhat dialogue based and not just me talking at you too much. But I do have lots to share, so I probably could if I wanted to. But I want to first, start with where you're at in your training, in your journey to facilitating this amazing work conceived by Pam and developed by so many others. I want to validate that I think you have all explored most of the child archetypes, either deeply or at least superficially, right? So you roll around in some of the wounded victims and judges, but also played maybe with the magical child and the nature child, and are now perhaps already feeling like you're turning toward new ways, at least through the facilitator lens. You're turning toward new ways of being and knowing and holding people, and holding yourself. And that is often the huntress. That is the bridge, right? In Pam's work with birth story listening, I do a lot of birth story listening, which is essentially reverse tigers. It's tigers for the past, or for events that have happened already, whereas tigers or CCEF is for the events that are in the future. I totally lost my train of thought, which definitely happens when you're facilitating. There you go. So yeah, I was talking about the child moving to the adult archetype, the huntress starting to, oh yeah, that's right, the bridge. So Pam talks about the different gates in birth story listening that someone telling their story might pass through, that you probably have all at least seen as a handout in the Baj content. And many people, as they are, processing their story and being in relationship with their story, they get stuck at the sixth gate, the gate of the victim judge. And Pam refers to this as the revolving door. So in your explorations with the victim and judge, you've probably played with how they talk to each other, back to each other, and just revolve and revolve and revolve. And then there's something that shifts that makes one kind of look up and have a broader perspective. And that's the hunter-huntress. That's that gate of the hunter-huntress, or the gate of forgiveness, or the gate for hunting for new language, for new ways of, again, as I mentioned, like being and thinking in the world. So one of my favorite metaphors or stories that demonstrate this transition from victim child to hunter, and then eventually to the love warrior, is Cupid and Psyche. Is anyone familiar with Cupid and Psyche, the Greek myth? Maybe you've kind of heard about, the arrow Cupid, right, through Disney cartoonish Valentine's Day fame, actually has much more ancient roots. And it's a long, in-depth story, but the part I want to highlight was at the beginning, Psyche was in her innocent. She was a young maiden, right? And really adored by a lot of people, and in this magical child place. And she did as she was told. Her father, was told that the monster was going to come get her, and they had to chain her up at the top of a mountain to protect the entire community. So you should go do that. And she said, well, of course I'll do that. Protect my community. So she's chained up the top of the mountain, and this, passively, this wind, the zephyr wind, takes her to Cupid's castle, where she falls in love with Cupid, right? So all very kind of just letting it flow and carry you where you're going to go. And while she was living with Cupid's castle, who fell in love with her, she was only allowed to be with him at night, and she was never allowed to look upon him. So it was in the dark that she was in this relationship with him, and they would make love every night. And she never saw him, but she, loved him. And then once her sisters came to visit, and her sisters were like, so you haven't seen this guy that you're with? Like, what's going on? What if he's a monster? What if he's that monster that originally Dad, chained you up to be sacrificed to? Like, don't you want to check it out? And so there's like this motivation that comes when we think about monsters, right? The monster in the closet or under the bed, the tiger in the dark part of the forest, the Loch Ness monster at the bottom of the sea, right? There's this this monster presence that often wakes us up to, maybe there's something I need to do here. It's like a motivator, this beautiful gift of the fear, right? And so, as some of you might know in the story, she decides that night to see what was up. So she took her oil lamp and she took her knife. And these are the representations, or can be interpreted as symbols, of the hunter, huntress, and the love warrior. So the hunting is the light. Nicole Morales, who I, as you know, work with often, she talks about taking the flashlight and looking at all the corners that have cobwebs up in the attic of your psyche. That's a metaphor she'll often use, right? We're shining the light, and the hunter, huntress holds that light. And then the knife is the, I need proper props, I think, next time. The knife is the love warrior, right? So if she shines that light and sees that it's a monster, she will take action, protect herself, and slay that monster, right? So that's not what happens. The light from the oil lamp lands on Cupid, and he sees her and he's pissed and he flies off, and that's the whole second part of the story. But the symbology of the quality of her presence that she brings to this moment, that feels to me quintessential hunter, love warrior type of symbology. So any questions so far, maybe about that particular metaphor, or maybe we could take a few moments before I guide you through the tiger process yourselves as participants. We could take a few moments for you to share any additional relationship that you already have with the hunter, huntress, either metaphorically, or even how maybe it's unfolding in your own mentoring, or as you imagine working with those that want to then work with parents. I just want to see if anything's alive right now, as we've settled into the call.
I have something I could just quickly drop in, and it's great to see you, Jamie. It's been a while since you were mentoring me in my certification. But I just want to say, from that story, I love how often in these stories and these myths, it's the group of sisters that help remind, the women how important it is to bring out the love warrior and care for herself, and how in my life it's so true that sitting in circle with women always calls me back to what's needed within my own journey. And I just think it's a beautiful metaphor, and how often that pops up.
That is so interesting for this. Yeah, I hadn't even thought necessarily of what is it that helps us awaken, and sometimes it is community. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? Oh yeah, go ahead, Pam, you moved.
I was thinking about the hunter a bit, knowing that I was going to lead the opening meditation, and thinking what would be something that kind of sets the stage. How do I think of the hunter? Should we do something with a lion or a tiger? And ultimately for me, I feel in a literal sense, literal predators, and if you're actually hunting, I assume, I've never been hunting, I feel a lot of it is really just being in your body in that moment. It's really just not about the what ifs and the ways that you've been wounded before. It's really just being able to be aware of what's actually going on in this very moment, and then doing what the moment calls for, taking action without regard to what might happen, just doing your best and moving on, and then doing your best in the next moment. And I feel that's a lot of what they talk about in, maybe somebody can help me. I was trying to remember the name of, there was a book that was part of our assigned reading, something about a hunter, and I'm drawing a blank on the name.
Is it Craft of the Warrior?
Yeah. Craft of the Warrior, not hunter.
Warriors hunt.
But I feel one of the major takeaways for me of that book was just kind of acting.
Yeah, and that's such a huge part of the process that we're going to explore today. I mean, all of the processes in birthing from within are hunting and love warrior processes, but this one in particular, yeah, it's about what is the action, and being in your body, Pam. That I got goosebumps in my body when you were talking about that. That is essential to hunting. And I've actually done a lot of tracking. About over a decade ago, I did tracking classes when my daughter was really small, and we would study the tracks and study the curves of the little paw prints, or the, bird tracks, and all the details, right, of all the different creatures that could pass over a chunk of terrain. And it's such a similar process to it's such detail and curiosity that you bring your presence to looking at the tracks, almost like the tracks are patterns of archetypes that are patterns we often see, we really don't know. But then when you get to trailing, where you like actually are following an animal's path that they took, it's a little more like the hunting, right? You're smelling the air and the weather. You like, maybe it rains, so the mud track is different, and maybe it dried 2 days ago, so the track will look different with that. And like, you are just doing what the moment needs, and your ego might get in the way sometimes, because you're like, well, if I were that fox, I would have gone that way over the rock, but clearly the path goes this way. So anyway, sorry, I sort of took your lovely share and took it my own way, because that hunting is something that is truly embodied. So thank you. Anybody else?
Maybe you're going to mention this, Jamie, but I'm wondering if perhaps you can say just a word about, when we're talking about hunting from an archetypal perspective, what is the hunter hunting?
Ooh, what are they hunting?
And you might already be bringing this piece in, but I'm thinking about,
Yeah, I guess it's
like, learning about this from Pam and how it really shifted my perspective. And so I can share more if it's not like drawing anything in for you, but I didn't want to jump in too much.
yeah. I think the process itself will certainly reveal. It can be really, like, from a facilitator's point of view, you're essentially hunting the child archetypes, to validate them and to expand what's possible. And at one point, I remember Pam saying, like, what was it? I am the huntress. Love is the hunter. Love is the hunter, and I am its prey. And I'm just like, oh, that's pretty fantastic. But it sounds like you have some additional framework that you want to highlight, Christine, and I absolutely welcome that. It'd be lovely.
I was writing down what you said, the quote. Well, I like that you brought in the from a facilitator perspective of like hunting the child archetypes, right? Or even thinking about that as we're working with parents. And then I guess the piece that I was following the thread from was more like when we're awakening that archetype within ourselves versus thinking about it in relationship to working with others. And it's that piece of, we're hunting personal freedom. We're hunting our own personal power and personal freedom. And that was just like a big aha moment for me when I started thinking about it from that perspective. And I think about the times that we might be working with people and maybe with ourselves, and we're following threads of beliefs, seeds of beliefs, whether they're agreements or black and white thinking, things like that. And we are helping to awaken the curiosity that it takes and the desire that it takes to want to know more. Oh, we lost Jamie. Um, about what the seed of that belief is, the agreement, the belief, the reason that we were activated in a moment or triggered in a moment, like what's that about, right? And so when we can kind of follow those threads and become more aware and familiar with the beliefs that led us to have a response or a reaction, right? That's where true personal freedom lies, because then we're not reacting, we're responding with choice. And that's much different than just reacting. Hi, Jamie, welcome back.
Hey, I missed the answer. Oh, well. Were you referring like to personal freedom?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Just that piece of like the curiosity, the desire that needs to be woken to want to follow the thread of a belief or an agreement about like, why did we respond this way in this moment? Why do we have this bias? Why were we triggered? Why did we get flustered? Like all these different kinds of whys. And then we're following that. That's the tracking, right? We're following like, what's the root of that? Is it something that maybe happened in my childhood that now I'm still holding that makes me respond this way? Or is it, because I just came from this really intense situation and walked into the room and I'm still, activated, or, any number of things that might really help us to um, track, what those kinds of things are that eventually that lead to personal choice, personal freedom. So that was exactly where I was going with it. And for me, that was a big aha moment when I was learning about the hunter. So I just I didn't have it in my mind before, but it just kind of came up in this moment of like, yeah, what are they hunting? Yeah.
Such a good question. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions from you all or comments before we move into talking about and experiencing the process? Okay. And of course, there's that distinction between the hunter and the gatherer, which I assume you all have dug into a bit. Yeah. And that hunting is about inner knowing rather than some kind of external type of knowing. So let's go within. Let's do it. So as Christine nicely explained, this tiger's process is sort of maybe one of the deep roots of the really concise and incredibly effective courageous and compassionate excavation of fear. I'm gonna just call it the excavation from now on, so I don't get tongue-tied every time I say it. And it's very, very, very similar. In fact, it's essentially the same idea of where you're headed. It just includes some additional things. And in some ways, no matter what process that we're leading, we can bring some of these elements, like using hypnotic language, right? Inducing a sort of trance from a non-manipulative way, right? From a way of like, because we think of, trance and hypnosis and being like controlled, right? This is more of we're all under hypnosis all the time. Let's unearth ways that we can have more personal freedom and choice in the moment with our hypnosis, right? It's an induction. It's a way to, as many of the stories that we tell or the myths or the metaphors that we use, it's a way to kind of trick the conscious mind into taking a backseat so that the unconscious mind, which has infinite resources, can come more forth. Okay. And we do that just by slowing down our voice, in any birthing from within process, including the excavation. And with the tigers, we just go a little more deep. That's about it. The other difference that you will probably notice is that because we go or can go fairly deep with tigers, it's not a lot of solution focused dialogue as there is in the excavation, the back and forth. That element is saved for the end. So you still get to, asking questions and helping people find their new belief, right? Supporting them in excavating that. So the other way that it's really similar, as I'm kind of diving into it now, is with the framework. So you would, of course, want to validate, right? That, and just like I want to validate you all, that it makes a lot of sense to not just dwell on your fear, to not be like those record players where there's a skip in it and you just keep going over the same fear over and over and over. We know that that's physiologically not helpful. So I validated you all and parents, like that makes sense, that we don't want to just be thinking about fears all the time, right? Because some people feel like that's you know, they want to be in avoidance of it. So there's some wisdom in that avoidance. And that's really, I think, common in birth in our culture right now. You know, that you don't want to think about the thing that you don't want to manifest. And so to start right where they are, for a lot of parents, that's what we do. Okay, sorry, this is about you all. And then the other element of the framework is about physiology, you know, how fear affects the body, and both in birth and in life. And one of my recent bits of research that I'm really landing on around physiology and the hormones is kind of, it's a little bit beyond, you know, adrenaline interrupts birth. It's more like oxytocin is the hug and the buffer that allows adrenaline to be helpful in the labor process. Just like in non-labor situations, physiologically, when we feel fear, the body automatically dumps a ton of oxytocin, particularly on the heart. And it's like protective of the blood vessels and of the heart and of the brain, right? And this oxytocin is a motivation to seek community, because it's oxytocin helps us connect with others and get support. So it's just beautifully orchestrated. And even, you know, the classic fight, flight, freeze that we often teach people about in birth, you know, it's almost like that becomes vilified in some way, like at no cost should anyone be in those places while they're giving birth, otherwise it's going to be ruined, right? And we know that that's just not the case. The body's incredibly dynamic, and it's how we move through the fearful moments, how we honor the fight and the flight and the freeze and let them do what they need to do, that carries us through those tough moments, both in birth and then now, of course, in facilitation, you know, with the birthing from within approach. So anything else I wanted to say there? Okay, I think we're good. So if you haven't already, if you could gather your art supplies, whatever you're going to use today to create imagery, either in your journal, as I think Christine probably mentioned in an email before, of course, to always bring your journal, or the art paper, the large sheet of art paper, if you have that available to you. So just keep it somewhat nearby. So when the moment is right, you can easily reach for your pastel or your pen. And when we get to that part.
Can you share the quote? The oxytocin is the hug for the container. There was something that you said.
Oh, what did I say? Yeah. It's like the hug and the buffer to render adrenaline more helpful. And that's like, there's this peak. So I think it goes like this. If you imagine a curve with a contraction or a wave or however it's being framed, there's like endorphins that come along, and then there's oxytocin, and then at the peak is adrenaline, and then there's a surge of oxytocin, and then a peak of endorphins, right? And so that's adrenaline needs to be, that is the peak, right? That is the shift, that is the learning and the change, the uncomfortableness, the change in the physiology. But that I was studying an Italian midwife's work, Anna Maria Rossetti. She's in the spinning babies community, and she showed that particular graph. And I'm like, oh my God, it's like oxytocin's hugging the adrenaline. And that's, yeah, keeping it buffered from wreaking the havoc that we typically associate with adrenaline, right? Of being harmful to tissues and making us freeze and stuff. Okay. Great. So our first step today, much like in the excavation, is to open up our worry minds a little bit. So you have already probably been doing all kinds of things because you know, have birthing from within. You also probably have other modalities and practices that are alive with you to support your facilitation journey. And maybe you have community, maybe you have other resources, right? There's all kinds of things that you're already doing to support your journey. And there probably are also things that are maybe nagging you, or things that you're kind of hoping won't happen in your facilitating time. So for example, some people worry that there'll be like a conflict on the, you know, the Zoom screen that you might have to mitigate right? Or be a part of, or help to facilitate communication around. Or someone might accuse you of something in the Facebook group, or however you're working as a facilitator, if you do eventually do in-person stuff. Or one of my fears was, well, if I'm going to teach them this tigers process, this excavation process, and what if the fear that they excavate happens and they blame me for it happening, because I'm the one who brought it up and made them look at their fears, and then it happens. So so there's all kinds of things, right, that could go wrong in our facilitation. Wrong being, of course, in quotes, right? But what is it that you're sort of hoping? I don't really want to have to deal with that. That's maybe coming up for you around facilitation, or your interactions with mentors, and if nothing's really coming up around facilitation, maybe with your birth work, or even just your life, if that feels alive right now. So some of you might have like a little bullet point list already going in your minds. If you want to jot any of them down, you're welcome to. We're just going to, as you know, land on one, but maybe we'll take a moment for some of us, that's helpful to kind of get the worry mind going a bit, to open up Pandora's box, right? To use that metaphor, to let some of the things out. That Greek myth ends with, at the bottom of the vessel, right, that Pandora opens. Once it's all out, there's hope at the bottom, is one interpretation of that myth. So let's just see what else is there. We can write it down. Maybe you already know right now exactly the thing. And you might pick something that's kind of a 7 out of 10 and not a 10 out of 10. And in terms of intensity, for how your body maybe is responding as you're thinking about this possibly happening. And usually we're working with external fears. It usually makes this process a little easier, rather than an internal fear, which would be like, I'm going to feel like I don't know what I'm doing. But I think that's perfectly fine for this process right now, if it's an internal one. But often that manifests as like somebody reflecting that internal thing to us, just like in birth, right? Okay. Yeah, so as you're looking over your list, if there's a few things listed there, which one of those feels like it wants to be worked with tonight? And in a way, much like with birth story listening, when people are choosing a moment from their birth, in a way, it doesn't matter what moment you pick, right? Because all of it leads to that same place of that deep self-belief that we might be holding. So no pressure here. Yeah. All right. Now, is anyone open to sharing maybe what their thing that they're hoping doesn't happen in their birthing from within facilitation journey? And we could maybe help you hone it, especially if you're not quite sure if this is the thing, or am I doing this right? Because as maybe you know from the excavation process, we are going to hone in on one frame of that particular thing that you're hoping will happen, right? One moment, essentially. So, yeah, anyone open to sharing this? If I want to just acknowledge that this can feel pretty vulnerable, because somebody in one of my facilitation groups, they said, I'm nervous that people are going to like my partner's style of facilitating more than mine, because I was mentoring with a co-mentor. We were going to do classes together, and she just said that. I'm like, wow, that's, yeah. So however, whatever you want to share and feel comfortable with in this space. Luann, did I see you raise your hand? I think. No. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. What I wrote down was actually more on the internal side, but I'll go ahead and share anyhow. I'm right now reading the book, The Sugar Jar. I don't know if y'all have heard of that one, but it's all about like pulling your power back and like reaffirming like boundaries. It's a very like self-care kind of book. And this is probably why I wrote this down, because this has been on my mind. It's talking about the concept of like, you know, we are our own sugar jars, and like the sugar represents like the energy that we're putting out for roles that we serve, passions that we have, etc. And one of my worries was I don't want the facilitation work to become something that I'm like resentfully pouring out. Like, I don't want it to become, I worry that it will lose the original excitement and amazement that I had with it due to all of the other scoops of sugar that are currently being pulled out of me just as a mom, and like teaching classes, like my own classes, and like all of these competing things. It's funny, Amanda and I had like a conversation loosely around this concept of like, there's so much stuff in our lives that we are passionate about, and what do you do when you face that hard truth, perhaps, that I don't have enough sugar for this? So that was my original like bleh, that I wanted to put out on the page, because that's been on my mind. I think probably at the juxtaposition of me reading this book and this in general being like a rough couple of days energy wise for me. And just coming to this meeting feeling that feeling of like, I don't want this. First of all, I don't want this training to become that, and I don't want my work as a facilitator with birthing from within to become that. And like, oh, what does that mean? And how am I showing up for future birth workers? And yeah, that's a lot. It's not so much external, but it was something I felt I needed to share.
Yeah, thank you, Luann. It's so good to see you again and chat with you. I'm wondering if we can use our imagination, and anyone else that maybe has an internal one like that, if you could just imagine how that might play out in a future situation where you would then realize you don't have enough sugar in your jar. Like, is there a particular scenario, just, just from not even necessarily related to a way that you've been facilitating or in your mentoring, but just a little, like, can you picture maybe a Zoom screen with, something, a scene you can picture? Sorry, I'm not articulating this super clearly, but is there just something you could imagine that would be external, but that would be related to that internal feeling of not having enough? What do you think, Luann?
As I think about that as an external outcome, I think about, let's say I'm moderating the Facebook group, right? And there, someone asks a question that instinctively I'm feeling like, okay, yeah, this is going to require like some thought. And, I feel that tension in my body rising up of like, oh, I should answer this thoughtfully. And then here comes Judge. And I imagine Judge telling me, oh, see, you didn't have enough sugar to like come to, this question or or this statement thoughtfully the way perhaps you wanted to. I imagine myself in situations like that, and Judge just being so loud, shouting over this original like curiosity and excitement and belief that I'm going to show up, you know, in these moments with what the moment needs and requires. So I guess to answer it in a packaged way, I imagine Judge just being so loud and shouting me down again, like it has done so many times in my life. And like being like desiring to be love warrior and be huntress and find this gumption in myself, but like being in a dense fog because Judge is just like dispensing all of this gunk and not being able to find my way.
I think that'll be perfect or just fine for this practice, Luann. In particular, the imagined scene of, okay, I'm sitting at my computer or on my phone, I go to the Facebook page, there's this post, there might even be initial enthusiasm, and then Judge, it sounds like you have a in-depth relationship with already, comes in and there's the yeah, just kind of hoping that won't happen. Yeah. Does that sound good, working with that particular imagined scenario? That works for you, Luann? Okay, awesome. Great. And then Amanda.
I had a couple ideas come up. One that seemed like a 7 out of 10 is a fear of being intimidated by an attendee, by someone that's going through, you know, a new cohort. For example, I think of clinicians that have experience, you know, like a midwife, you know, there were some midwives in the crossing the threshold that I was in. I was intimidated back then for different reasons, but I imagine being fearful of being intimidated as a facilitator, as one that is bringing information and facilitating a process, and one that should have lots of information about this, and a fear of like not having more information than this person that works in a completely different capacity and is probably joining this in their own, with their own reasons, and on their own path. And just, so it's definitely some internal stuff, that feeling of intimidation. But then I think it's connected to some external stuff too, which is kind of a bigger fear of like, what if they ask a question and I don't get it right? Like that's a bigger one. That was like, oh, that's a 9.5. I can't touch that right now. So just kind of hanging out in that idea of being intimidated by someone and the narrative that's going on in my head about it.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm kind of wanting to rewrite my rule about it being a 7 ideal. I kind of think that one's really nice.
I'm fine with that. I'm
But
just
if
being
your body says
really
no.
vulnerable. No, I'm cool with it. But I was like, ooh, that was the first one that came to mind, and maybe I should just like, yeah, see if there's one that's a little more. But I'm open.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm going with it. My hunter's like, let's just go there if you're up for it. Okay, if for you, Amanda, and for anyone who, as you're working through, as you're experiencing the process, you need to step back or not be in the scene anymore. I know that you all are good at doing that for yourselves and are also, you know, supporting people in doing that for themselves. So just a reminder about that too. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Amanda. Anybody else feel like they want to share their, we call them the tiger, the thing, right? The thing that's sort of lurking, that creates the same physiology process of fear that being in the moment would also produce, imagining the moment, right? As we talk about with parents. Pam, did you raise your hand?
I didn't, but I could. Um,
Very nice.
I was just looking at mine that I jotted down, and the two that came up are actually pretty similar to Amanda and Luann's. This has been coming up a lot for me with the idea of becoming a facilitator, is that I just have a lot of stuff from being a birth worker coming up. But the two biggest things are things that kind of happen all the time already. One is feeling just really not useful. Like I do things like, I don't know, to the best of my ability, and leave people feeling really like empowered after our session, and then they take it into the real world and they don't get an outcome that is like that they want at all, and it just feels like, what was the usefulness of that? Like, I can't shake that. And even feeling like sometimes then it's like almost harmful, like giving people the illusion that they have more options than they actually do. So there's definitely like a victim judge thing going on there of like, well, maybe you should just be like, yeah, if the system's messed up, it's not going to happen the way you want to. Like, and then the other part of me being like, but that's not very helpful. And like, isn't it useful just to like bear witness and like be there with somebody, like supporting them through something messed up, and not our job to change it, and actually kind of colonial and paternalistic to try and change their life for them. But anyway, that was my first one.
Okay.
And then the second one is, I think to me feels really related to what Luann was talking about, of just like taking on too much. And for me, it was more like less in a time commitment way and more of in an emotional way of like this came up for me when we were doing the hearts question in our first session too, but just like, how can I hold a container without becoming the container? Like, how can I like hold the sacred space and witness people without like taking everything on for myself, into myself?
Good. And which two of those? Yeah. Out of those two that you shared, Pam, which one
I
feels like?
think the second one is kind of foundational, and kind of encompasses the first one. Like, the first one could be like reworded as me kind of just still taking on too much.
So what is there a specific imagined example that would encapsulate or even like impel the feeling that you're talking about?
I think that I guess if I'm gonna set a scene, and like this is, you know, it's not like a hypothetical fear, like it's happened many times already, like it happens. But I think it would be like somebody sharing something really maybe heavy with me of like their experience, me holding space for them. Maybe it happening like in front of me, I don't know. And
Well, we'll clarify that for your scene.
okay,
So
okay.
it's
So
happening
maybe
front
in the
of-
context of a facilitator, I guess it would be like if they're like sharing their experience with me, they're like maybe sharing something that they've been going through with a client, maybe like abuse of their client, and them being like traumatized, and me also being traumatized. That's the fear, instead of me like kind of having kind of like the energy boundaries to be like, yeah, that's really messed up, and dialogue with them and hold space for them without like bring it home with me afterwards.
Good, Pam. Thank you. Thank you for sharing both of those. And letting us explore the process with you about how we hone in on the scene. So when we do this with parents, and of course, when you're teaching birth educators and doulas to do this with parents, this is an important step, right? To get really clear about what the scene is, because it's an anchor. It's like, so if you can't picture it, dig a little deeper with your parents. If it's a large group and it's impossible to do it for everybody, which like today, we're already at an hour in, so we'll probably pause with the individual sharing of what your tiger is. But spending this time, at least with a few people, right, to get clear about what it is they're going to meet. What is the scene? It's like solution focus, right? How exactly would that be a problem for you? And how would it look? What would be happening, right? So, does anybody need that to refine their scene for this practice? Feel pretty good. And you can picture it, right? So if you can't picture it, if it just seems somewhat nebulous, then again, dig a little bit and just have them imagine, especially because it is the future. So it can be anything. Okay, great. So now, again, art supplies nearby. You may be wondering, oh goodness, Jamie, what's going to happen next? What are you going to do? Yeah, if there is something that your body is already wanting to do, you might already be following that inclination, right? And even as you're wondering what is going to happen next, you're already starting to turn your attention inward, to turn your attention downward. Hearing a buzz in the room or a flicker in the light, indicating the inwardness that you can connect with. Your breath. And wondering, I wonder myself, what shoulder is going to relax first? Will it be the left one? Will it be the right one? I wonder if my next breath will be slow or fast. Just noticing what's there. And even as you're noticing what's there, your eyes might be heavier. I wonder if they'll close now or maybe a little later, or not at all. Softening, moving inward, moving downward. That's right. Just like that. The soft place, the paced place, the place where you can learn something new. Like leaves falling from the tree when the moment is right. It's so easy. It's so natural to learn something new. That's right. Just noticing your breath, just like that. The soft earth that the leaf lands upon, like the seat that you're sitting upon, landing on this earth. The soft paws of the hunter moving over the landscape. The hunter stalking, because the huntress is hungry. Hungry for her body, or even hungry for her mind, new understanding. Called to hunt because she's curious. It's so natural for a hunter to hunt. She's quiet. These hunters, they embody their prey. It's so intimate. Like the intimate relationship with your breath, with your body. And the hunter senses a scent on the breeze, notices it in her breath, That's right. Just like that. Just like you. Letting the scene and what you're hoping won't happen start to emerge in your mind's eye. Getting closer. Noticing every detail as the scene comes to mind. Bringing your courage, your curiosity to the scene. The slow pacing, one paw and the other. One breath and the other. You notice the sounds in the scene. What people maybe are saying, maybe what you're saying out loud. You notice the sights, the lighting in the room, who's there, who's not there. And you're noticing what you're touching. Maybe what's touching you. And tracking your own sensations in your body as this scene unfolds of what you're hoping won't happen. You're getting close now as you're tracking. You're learning, not avoiding, feeling your body in response to what's happening. And asking yourself, what are you telling yourself about yourself? Because this is happening, what does that mean about you? Staying in your huntress mind, feeling into the answer to this question rather than thinking about it, tracking. What is it you tell yourself? I am what? I am powerless, a failure, not good enough, weak. With that deep curiosity, with this focused urgency, but also all the time in the world. What are you telling yourself about yourself? I am what? And this feeling in your body, do you notice a collapsing, a tightening? Do you notice your breath change? Right? The body changes and responds to beliefs. And the child within us tries to feel safe, right? To be loved, to feel worthy. And there's a part of all of us that feels that way. Noticing your breath as you hear your child speak in your inner ear. And shifting to the adult, that other part of you. The adult who is a seeker of solutions. The adult who is a seeker of self-awareness. you shift your position as this adult starts to awaken. Right? This adult who protects, who preserves the well-being of the children, who's already starting to figure out what to do, even when they don't know what to do next. Noticing your breath. Noticing your breath as a new kind of knowing is needed in the unknown. This kind of knowing that's in your bones. These bones in our body on our seat, our breath, like digging bones, hands in the soft earth, patient, curious, digging down, down, down. Your hands dirty, finding a bone in the darkness. This bone you dig up in the darkness, in the deep earth of your psyche. You're digging it up and brushing it off. And it has a message just for you. Unearthing this new belief, this bone of truth. What's more true? Holding the bone close to your heart. Then turning now to that same scene. Turning your hunter's head toward that same scene unfolding. This thing you wished wasn't happening or wouldn't happen. You still wish it weren't happening, but your whole attitude has changed. What's different? This scene. What action might you take now? What might you say? It's different. What might you do? As you have this new belief, this new feeling, this new sense of what's really more true. Notice how you're even moving differently now. Yeah, that's right. Just like that. I am. What is it for you? I am flexible. I am learning. I am good enough. What is your new belief? Again, what's more true? As you meet the same scene, what's being said might be the same, but what you're telling yourself might be different. Even as you yawn or shift or adjust, What do you notice that's different? And this new attitude, this new presence, this new way of being, starting to breathe that belief into your body now. 3 special beliefs, or 3 special breaths. And that feeling in your body, going to every cell. That feeling, this new belief permeating the corners and the folds of your body, everywhere. And starting to breathe that belief down to your feet. To breathe that belief to your hands. And while a part of your mind is holding this image of yourself coping, of yourself taking action, the other part of your mind is coming into this room, your space. Maybe your eyes want to open. Your body wants to adjust. Again, keeping a part of your mind on that image and taking action with your hand, grabbing your pen or your pastel and capturing that image on the page of you coping with this unwished for scene or moment. So we'll take a few minutes now for you to draw on the page. Draw on your paper. The strongest image that you're carrying with you. Right, so that we have enough time to dialogue a bit. Let's just take one more minute. Thank you. Thank you, Christine. Okay. So as you're finishing up, you might even write your I am statement at the bottom of the page or at the top of the page. You can pull out your journal and write about anything that maybe surprised you in this process. Or maybe even something that you might do differently this week or this month as a result of this exploration today. What did you discover with your drawing or in the process itself? What did you discover about yourself? Or maybe even what you learned about the archetype, the huntress, hunter. Okay. So I believe that when this call ends, you will all explore the hunter, huntress even more with a collage in your smash book, right, Christine? Yeah. So that might be a continuation of your journaling now. But I would love, since we have this precious shared space minutes here, to hear about maybe any new questions that have arisen, or if anyone wants to share their old I am statement and their new I am statement, or anything else. Finley, did you raise your hand? Just resting. All right, you wrote, I was surprised how still shut down? Still shut down. Okay, I was surprised how I still shut down and become small in moments of
Yeah,
just.
that was supposed to be shut, not shit. Sorry.
All shit is welcome too. So.
And then I was just typing, but it's easier to just tune in. But I was also surprised at how much more familiar I am with the path to accessing my adult love warrior at this point of my life, and how excited I kind of got to step into that and wear that, and yeah, like welcome the unknown with a like a sudden confidence as you continue leading that, and like an inner knowing that all is well, and And because the path is in line with my truth, that there's really nothing to worry about, but to have the willingness to show up with a love warrior is kind of the key to move forward.
Thank you. I love how you use the word, that willingness, that it is just a shift in our will, that it's, yeah, that is not something external, as you pointed out. I'm curious, was your I am statement like all is well? Was it that something like that, or was it a little?
In the end,
Mhm.
yeah, it was that kind of had the essence, like, yeah, just these, like, I am gifted with this path and grateful. There's no need to know. I can ask for what I need. I'm loved and supported. I am on the right path. All is well.
Yeah, I'm loved and supported. Yeah, so that is what we are hunting for as facilitators or as mentors, is something that is true no matter what is happening. And often the words sometimes don't have to necessarily match. Like if it's just a shift in how they're postured, and just the kind of you have this sort of groundedness to me, as you're sharing right now, that makes me feel like even if the words don't quite fit or feel like that's what we should be saying, that I'm good enough or whatever, that's the quality we're going for. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for guiding that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anybody else? Either questions about the process and how it might work with mentors, or how you might guide them to do this with parents, something like this with parents. Did we lose somebody? I think we did. Yeah. What we could do is have you write in the chat your new I am statement, if that might help us all to reconnect, because many of us shared our events that we were hoping weren't going to happen, our scenes.
I just wanted to share verbally that for my scene in particular, going through the visualization, I was surprised at how quickly I wanted to back out. Like when you had us visualizing being the tiger, in my mind, I was a panther. Tracking, and I found myself really feeling like feline, like I'm afraid, and now I'm kind of like going like this and backing out of feeling not enough, feeling like I have to show up to this particular situation with like a whole bag of sugar. And then it led me to believe like, oh, you're severely undervaluing the sugar. And I'm thinking that I'm having to come to the situation with like this massive amount of whatever, fill in the blank, as opposed to being like, even if you can give just a teaspoon, that's enough, and that is valuable, and that's wise, that's all of these things. So yeah, there are going to be some days where the jar is not 3/4 full of what I want it to be, but what I have to give, even if it's just a little sprinkle, I have to believe that that's enough and valuable. So that's where that led me. And so as you took us out of the visualization, it did felt lighter, and not as finicky, like I wasn't walking in this like scared cat like way. So that was really powerful. I really appreciate this particular exercise.
Thank you, Luann. One thing I want to highlight from your share that's important for any visualization is how Luann just made it her own. Did you all sense that? Like some of you maybe were I did talk about a paw, but that could have been a dog. That could have been a fox. and you went with the panther. I know the exercise is called tigers, so it's kind of plants the seed of the feline, but the hunter, right? That you took it where you needed to take it, and that is what makes it impactful. Is if we're not too specific when we're using our visualization. I think you did a section on visualization with Maeve, so I just wanted to highlight that. Yeah, awesome, Luann. Mhm. Anything else? We're a little past the time, but I think we have a few minutes to kind of wrap up. Yeah, thank you for writing your new statements on the side there. I'm showing up. I'm enough. I am a wholehearted birth worker. I'm whole. I am safe. Did someone just unmute? Pam.
Oh, I didn't mean to, sorry.
So we're going to talk a little bit about pitfalls and hooks and ways to spot the huntress or hunter in your mentors, how we validate the huntress. So maybe those are some things you can take to your journal and talk with Christine and Koyuki on the next call about, or maybe I'll hand it over to you, Christine, about next steps. Yeah, thanks everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. And we haven't really gone into visualization too much, actually, in this time that we've had in this group, but we will do more of that. And I think you really beautifully modeled just the experience of all of the kind of seeds of visualization coming together and doing the work, right? And how powerful that can be. I surely felt that. So the next step is continue kind of with the theme we've been doing, exploring archetypes in our journal with or in the Smash book with journaling and collage or art. Could be paint, any kind of medium that you're called to, but maybe bringing it I was going to suggest really kind of making it about your own personal hunter-hunters versus awakening that in those of others, but really whatever calls to you about this archetype, it's open, just wherever it might lead you. And we will be revisiting some of these things as well. So the pieces that maybe we didn't get to, I'll keep on a note to come back and see how we might tie these kinds of things in as we go. And then I'm also so curious, we won't have time to talk about it tonight, but maybe in our Facebook group, I started a prompt just asking about the Inanna story map and sharing the Inanna story. And I've been very curious to hear what's come up, and if anybody wants to share anything about their story map or sharing a story or share an image or a photo, even whatever you feel good about in that space. I'd love to hear more. We'll see you next time with Koyuki. Yes, Pam.
Sorry, I just have a question about the Facebook group because I'm not really on Facebook, so I haven't been on the group. I've been in like our facilitator space.
Yeah.
I have a Facebook account. Like I could be in there if is there a lot going on? Do I? Okay.
You're not missing. I mean, it's an optional space to share and continue dialogue. And there we haven't been like chatting it up too much in there that you should have FOMO about. And also, if you want to jump on anytime and check it out, feel free, but there's no need. It's not a requirement. It's not, there's nothing you need to upload there to join it. So
Okay.
totally optional. Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
wish that the Facebook or the Facilitator forum had a space that we could be in dialogue, and it is a work in progress. We have to purchase a plugin. And eventually the Baj and the all of our forums will be all on the website, but we're just kind of getting there. So we're building it. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. I've been
Yeah.
wondering about that. Thanks.
Yeah, our goal is to get off of Facebook. We really want to, but unfortunately, it is kind of the best free platform for what we're trying to do right now. So, all right, thank you, everyone. So grateful for this time together, and I'll send an email out in the next couple of days. Next month, in the email, you're going to receive a self eval because it's actually the halfway point next call of this time together. So we'll be sending a self eval similar to the one we started with, which is just you kind of sharing with us about how your process is and from where you started, where you are now, that kind of thing. So I'll send the link out in the email. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks.